Hey everybody, sorry about that. A rough start there. Oh, let's see what's going on here. Getting back on the stick here. Had some gig energy and had to set this bad boy back. What do we got here? Oh yeah. All right, see how this guitar is settled in. Seems like it's in good shape. How's it going, folks? Oh my goodness. What do we got? All right, so back from the trenches. So just did my gig on Saturday and took Sunday and Monday off, and back here on Tuesday with another episode of Office Hours. Hey guys, how's it going? Yesterday I had some downtime away from gardening and taking care of domestic stuff, and figured it was oh hey, I don't know why my computer said come on, let's get rid of that, bye bye. And decided to give this old girl a bath a little bit. You know, this guitar has been a good friend of mine, and obviously it does look kind of chewed up, but you can see I cleaned it up a little bit. In the weeks prior to the gig, I was doing a lot of playing, a lot of woodshedding, a lot of practice for what I was going to be playing, and learning some new songs. Well, they weren't new so much as like I hadn't played them live with a band ever before. But I mean, I knew the songs. Sorry about this. Pardon my body. It's hot down here. And, you know, the guitar was perfectly played in. The strings had done all their movement. Everything was good. And I had been playing it probably hard for a week or two, and or maybe longer. And so the strings weren't stretching or doing anything weird. But the guitar was getting a little gummy, so I did the gig and brought it back up. And that's kind of an important thing, I think, is if you don't have a backup guitar, then you're in the position of breaking a string and being put in that position where you're like the bottleneck for the flow of energy for an entire bar full of people. And having not brought one in the past, and having had the bad luck of the string breaking, right, and feeling that degree of discomfort, you know, it's something I decided I never want to do. Hey, usually can't watch me live, but I'm so glad you caught this. Whoops, sorry guys, sorry as I touched this temporarily thanks to police investigation. So here I am. Wow. You can't. What's going on? That's terrifying. So yeah, I'm sorry to hear that you're available because of a police investigation. That sounds awful. So I played at a place out on Long Island that's kind of storied around here. It's definitely like one of the more It's like definitely like a dead bar, like you walk in and every place it's like completely covered in bumper stickers and posters, all all manner of things related to the dead. Everything's tie-dyed. There's pictures of friends of the great within the Grateful Dead community have their wake there. It's like it's definitely a storied place. It's called Bose, and it's a small little. It's a dive bar, but it's spectacular. I mean, the place is obviously it's like a proving ground, kind of. I think for New York and Long Island bands in particular, it's definitely like a place. And it was my first time ever playing there, and I was excited to actually play there. And I played there with a band that's been around for a while and has had lots of people coming and going in and out of it over the years. And so it was wonderful to actually become part of that fraternity. And I really wanted to come through for the person that hired me. One of my somebody who I've played with on other gigs referred me for the gig, and it was for new stuff. I thought it was going to be a Grateful Dead show, which I could walk in cold. But when all of a sudden out came a bunch of kind of not obscure, like I said, but I haven't actually played Roadrunner, for example, with a band, let alone with another singer or something like that. So I had to like think about how I was going to be actually sitting there going, like sitting there playing How Sweet It Is or Second That Emotion, or all these Motown tunes that the Jerry Garcia band played. And that was kind of an interesting thing. And boy, man, what a great night. We had a terrific crowd, a great crowd, great fun. And the whole place lit up. It was wonderful. I felt very much responsible for everybody having a good time. And at the same time, it felt spectacular to be part of something bigger than myself. And so I'd like to thank Larry Metalago for getting me on the gig. Larry is a veteran of the New York Grateful Dead family for a long time here. And so after the gig, I came home, I kind of settled down and kind of thought about how things went and the prep that went into it. And which, by the way, I thought I was playing later in the summer. And then I got the call from the band leader, oh, hey, looking forward to seeing you in a couple of days. So I had to really step on the gas and finish up. I got an early jump on the work, like learning all the songs and stuff like that. And then I thought I'll come back and bone up, shortly before. And it just kind of caught me by surprise. So the Garcia band sound was kind of a shocker for me, actually, in that I took a little time to analyze how I could frame it better. And what I started noticing was that, contrary to the way that I have my rig set up for Grateful Dead bands with Knock 'Em Dead and other Grateful Dead things, the Garcia band has a little bit more built-in dirt to the sound. There's definitely more overdrive. It's not as crystal clear as the Dead sound, first and foremost. Sorry, my rig just needed to boot up again. It may pop. We may hear a pop in a second here. Yeah, we're going to hear a pop. So, there's more dirt on that Garcia sound than you think. And he's using the volume knob an awful lot. And obviously it's a more casual kind of experience, I think, in terms of his rig. I don't think those gigs got the same kind of attention as the stadium shows, for example. So what I did notice was that the way I was getting the best results was utilizing a little bit of overdrive in the basic sound. So when I'm playing, like middle position, there's a little breakup in there. It's like it's kind of pushed, but by pulling back, and also by using the neck pickup, which I don't think he does, I was able to kind of smooth out the transient and leave a little bit more room for the singer, and I was able to be full without being too brash. This going a lot different than hearing this. Just kind of like more push, and then by going here, when you brighten up, but the real eye-opener was how meaningful having what I would have, to that point in time, thought was way too much delay on a signal. So like with these kind of so much delay. It's swimming in delay. I never do like 6, 7, even 8 repeats. That's like 6 repeats. Okay. Now, granted, they are blurring, they are smearing. So, the audible result of that, right? The effect is, that it sounds a little cloudy behind you, but there's a lot of upfront like clutter actually. So when you splash in with those there's a lot of stuff right around there. So, and you know what? It worked really well. It's shocking how it was absorbed in a way that felt very on brand. And so once again, if your ears are hearing it, there's probably a reason for it being there. It really filled out the space because there's just one guitar in the Garcia band project. So I'm not so sure I would do it in a more cluttered environment, but it certainly did work. That, and believe it or not, I used a treble booster in the circuit that I had so that I could have kind of a creamier sound available in general, like this. But if I hit the treble booster, maybe 5 to 10% brighter and louder. So just that little extra clarity and push, especially when you're doing things that are like down low, right? It was really helpful. Really helpful. Up top, you have to be mindful of using this big thick black pick in the middle position with a bright amp. But man, great! It actually came through. Kemper sounding pretty goddamn good live, I gotta say. I think it obviously is loud. It's loud though. It's one of the first times I played with a singer who was just like a standalone singer in a long time, and as talented as she was, it put us in a position where like I think that singers are accustomed to like having a lot of me up there, like they're kind of, I mean, she has every right to have an unencumbered experience on stage, don't get me wrong, but it's different than it is when there isn't one there, for example, because as a musician, you need to hear 2 things loud and proud. So you're always kind of struggling, like, okay, yeah, especially when you're singing, I know I can take care of keeping my guitar out of my voice's way. If I'm balancing myself, I can always turn down how hard I'm hitting the guitar, or even just grab the volume knob. But man, super fun gig, really interesting experience, tons of great songs, things that I never would have probably gone and researched and found out about. So this is, if anything, is a reflection saying to anybody that's out there who's kind of a little afraid of coming out of their comfort zone for a gig, challenge yourself. You're not gonna kill anybody. You might humiliate yourself if you don't come through, but obviously this wasn't the end of the world. This was a great bar gig. It's not like I was at Madison Square Garden. That said, I am hopefully our band will be opening up for one of my heroes. It looks like we might be doing an opening slot at a festival, but we're still waiting for things to settle in. So that was like a nice bit of news actually to have come through as well. So the guitar, right? It was tired, but when I brought it home, it was time. It wasn't going to make it to the next gig, which is we're doing a benefit on June 6th. So I installed a new set of strings yesterday and cleaned off polished up my frets, which you can see now are, they're not, it's not quite as dirty on the fingerboard. Now, granted, I don't like get my fingers dirty and then play the guitar, but over time, there's little bits of like sweat and dirt and nastiness, and it does get kind of caked on into, you've seen those little half moon shapes of grime. I do take those off. I take a toothbrush with a little bit of water and a little bit of olive oil and kind of dampen. It's damp but not wet, and I just kind of go in there and kind of break it up a little bit and wipe it off real fast. And then we have a little device. I hope you guys own a fret protector. If you have a nice guitar. It's basically a stencil that goes over the fret that protects the wood on either side of it, so you can go across the board with mildly abrasive things like steel wool, 4O steel wool, and kind of buff out, like, the occasional little low spot or divot that might come up on, or corrosion that might accumulate on the frets over time. So, nothing too major, but gave the old girl a bath and a new set of strings, and cleaned out some of the, sometimes the grime will kind of build up in these corners between I have, fret like that and the fret wear. So this little area here, that corner can get filled in with mung and nastiness. Just kind of go in there with a little, usually I'll use just like an offcut of the 10 or the 16 string, and just kind of go right across, and you can see it comes up with like this little grime booger that lives up in each one of them. And then you do that first, and then you polish up everything, and then a little cloth fabric just to kind of get everything together. If you don't own some of the products I'm about to talk about, I would suggest that you actually look into Gorgamite or Miracle Cloth, and it's like a mild, it's a cloth that's dry, but it has this kind of powdery coating on it that has like coconut oil and some metal polish kind of imbued in. It's like impregnated with this stuff, and it starts out white, but as you hit the frets, it polishes them to a mirror shine and removes the top layer, like a super fine layer of it, without making a bunch of filings like steel wool. Now, the steel wool is really delicate too, but it doesn't polish quite the same. All right, so I'll use steel wool first to kind of take out any of the gross dents and stuff like that that build up over time, especially in the lower frets area. And couple that with following up with the Gorgamite. And again, I'm using the fret protector because the stuff does get kind of grimy, and with the open pores, this wood can get kind of, some yucky stuff in there. So I'll do that, and then I'll clean it off with like the aforementioned slightly damp toothbrush, wipe it off, and then we're pretty good to go. And then I'll usually put the strings on. These are 10s. Everybody always asks what strings I'm using. These are just your typical yellow pack of Ernie Ball Slinkies. But boy, oh boy, it's such a difference actually between broken in strings and new strings. And there's elements of it that sound definitely more Jerry actually when the strings aren't quite as burnished and played in. Remember that he was, had new strings every show. Sometimes at the break they would change the strings. I don't know how they get the guitar to settle in. My guitar has unfortunately a long settle in period because I'm bending a lot, and I bet you if I bend my high E, yeah, I'm flat. Now, those of you out there that'll say, oh, you aren't installing your strings properly, you just need to grab it and shake it. Yeah, I do that with every other string except for the high E. The high E and I have a bit of a push-pull relationship when it comes time for stretching. I'd say it's about 25% of the time that I try to shake out and kind of stretch manually rather than naturally stretch the high E into place. I'd say about 25% of the time strings break on me because I'm pulling it to try to get it ready fast, and inevitably I end up pulling. I'll pull them off 1 out of 4 or 5, and that's a bummer because then you got to deal with do I have extra singles, which I do, but I don't always, or do I have to crack open a new pack, and then you end up with one of that shitty thing. We all probably have like 4 or 5 packs of like 5 strings. So anyway, did that, brought it back up, and brought this. Fortunately, made it through the whole night with this, and had a great time, and then cut my losses. And thought I would just set it up. So that's the Garcia band sound with one caveat. There's this. I did come up with another patch that is just a little bit more thick. So not quite as much reverb, not quite as much delay. and a little bit more overdrive, and that coupled with the treble booster yields more like the most rocking sound my guitar was making that night. So this was the extent of not a lot of gain. That's for an old metalhead like me. I don't shy away from playing with more overdrive than that generally, but I wanted to try to keep things kind of away from the harder rock sounds that I'll bring into the Dead stuff, and keep it more classic. So great time. Played a couple of really challenging tunes. Now, granted, by the way, if you're ever a band leader, make sure that you have people tell the other people what key they play these songs in, because, like, for example, I learned Roadrunner in the key that's on the Keystone version with the saxophone and was in F, but there's apparently this band likes to do it in E. So all these songs, it's kind of like folk music. It reminds me a lot of bluegrass, or playing in like a folk music thing where everybody's like, oh, I do that song in this key or something like that. So while I may have been learning where they traditionally were, man, but what a great tune. Kind of complicated in that it just has a couple of little different, like, kind of arrangement ideas, but really an interesting tune. It has this lovely little thing at the very end, this kind of like this kind of little, right? That's the brightest, loudest, and most gainy sound I was using all night, and it was helpful. It's helpful, but I am looking forward to playing. Oh, well, there was one other sound I used. We did do Shining Star, so that tune I crafted a little setup with a little bit more ambience. I used this little. There's quite a lot of splash to that. So there's a long and modulating reverb. Right. Not too much high end though. This wasn't as overbright as. So that was for the solo, and then you can just kind of turn that off. That wasn't always on there. That kind of sound. Again, pretty overdriven. I think it's a common misconception that people think that Jerry Garcia played with a crystal clear tone. No, he didn't. He played with a guitar that had a very, very interesting wiring scenario that allowed him to turn down the volume into the front end of his amp, right? And so without sacrificing treble content. So he can turn down and lower the gain, but the amp is still roaring loud. I mean, it's playing very loud. And with the guitar all the way up, it's definitely gainy. Like, it definitely has some beef to it, You saw him a couple times in the '90s where he played with a ton of distortion. Yeah. So obviously, by the way, hi Hayes. So the idea obviously is seeing Garcia band and seeing the Dead. There's two different experiences for sure. though equally amazing, I'm sure. I never saw JGB perform. I was a dummy. He played at the Luntfontein Theater here in New York City a couple of times, or he did this run anyway. And really good friend of mine who I went to some shows with, some Dead shows. I never got to see. I didn't join him. He was saying, "Oh, you'll love it. It's really good. You have the tapes." Okay, so I am looking forward to. I'm looking forward to the rest of the day today, taking it easy. Although I do have a contractor, and you all know how I feel about those guys coming to the house to replace. You pay for something, and while they're installing it, a brand new thing, they damage it, and then they act like they aren't culpable for like, hey, I contracted you to actually install and middle, like, let's say a closet system like that. And then during the install, they damage it, and they're like, "That's it, yeah." No, sorry, that's not the way that works. Okay, it was JGB at JB JB. I don't know what JBG is, but I'm assuming that's just a typo. So anyway, looking forward to getting that chapter of my life done. My son comes home from school end of the week. So let's see what I can get here. This is where things end up. So boom, let's do that. So this, for example, this is my like kind of slightly broken up Europe 72 era like level of overdrive. Not what I'm beginning to notice is that there's this thing called the Fletcher-Munson curve, and if you're unfamiliar with this as guitar players, it's probably the reason why people aren't enjoying your sound live as much as possible. As things get louder, humans hear things differently. So you may recall being a child and there being a button on your stereo that said loudness. And what that was basically a preset EQ curve that boosted lows and highs. And the perception was that as we turn down the volume of music, we end up hearing more mid-range and less of the extremes. So as we lower the volume, we enhance those to make it sound nice, but still crispy and full at lower volumes. So let's cut to you being working by yourself on crafting your sound, like I'm by myself a lot. Granted, I do try to vet I'll even make a loop of what I'm doing and then go behind the drum set and then see if I can hear whether or not the drums volume leaves, if the guitar needs more treble to cut or more bass to feel full, right? And what I've been noticing is that you don't need a lot of treble if you've got volume. So right now, this it sounds a little dull actually at these levels, but on stage, where the volume comes up maybe another 20 to 30%. All of a sudden something happens where, like, trust me, that has plenty of treble content. So it's an interesting thing that as the volume comes up to concert levels, your settings that you might have had and thought, oh, I've got it totally together, they're bullshit. They, especially low-end content and treble. You'll find that you pour on the treble at these low volumes, then you turn it up, and now all of a sudden you sound like a tin can. Or back when I used to play more like heavy grindy music, I realized, oh shit, I don't need all this low end that I thought I needed. So I was dialing in my sounds before the drummer would come there. I'd be like, man, that sounds good and full. And then all of a sudden the bass player would come. I'd be stepping on that guy's toes, and it sounded muddy. So, so this is not new to me necessarily, but I was reminded of it this week. So it's nice to go back and kind of tailor your rig to gig volumes. Like this is still more manageable than that actual gig volume. That middle pickup though, it has a lot of upper mid-range bark to it. And so if you guys aren't playing a Strat, I feel like, okay, this is certainly a viable Garcia option. Then there's the Super 2, like the Humbuck, the big like Tiger and Wolf configurations. I know less than I should about the Travis Bean era in terms of those guitars. But I must say that this sound right here is really, really, is tailor-made to sit on top of the bass but not step on the kick drum or anything like that. It's really it's kind of a Goldilocks position, that middle pickup in the Strat, which oddly enough, I must say, when I first got the Strat, I thought of the middle pickup as kind of only usable because it was going to be sitting here between these two guys getting it. Kind of that Steve Ray Vaughan Mayer thing, or back here for funk. So anyway, that's just a post-mortem of my gigging experience and the joy of finally playing my guitar, feeling so crispy, and it's so much brighter and more like, in a way, it's kind of more pleasant to feel it, like the tactile sense. It feels like crisp and exact all of a sudden, as opposed to, it was feeling very warm and woody before. But now it's a little like I don't know why the strings just sound a little zingier and a little bit more like they're a little bit more rattle, not buzz, but kind of like that. So at this point, I basically am just treading water and wondering if anybody has any questions or interest, points at the things they want to share, or are curious about anything that's going on musically in their lives or whatever. If you're down, if you want, I don't really have anything too much to share today, other than what I already did. Is just like, how do I clean up my instrument? How do I make sure everything's in good working order? Protecting your tools is obviously a big thing. I hope everybody, when they gig, that they bring backup cords and a cable and a pack of strings and their wire cutters and all the shit that they think they're never going to need. It's kind of like driving around without a spare tire. You are going to need those things, and I definitely like the backup guitar. I have, you guys probably have seen one or two videos where if I'm playing a Strat, I'm not playing this Strat. And it's kind of like, to put it in Clapton-esque terms, if this was Blackie, there's a Brownie. I actually didn't do that on purpose. It makes me look like I'm some sort of Clapton sycophant, but I'm not. I actually went 30 years not really appreciating Eric Clapton. Played your first gig in Vegas. Okay, wow, that's cool. And I've been a huge help for prepping for that. Thank you. Oh, what songs did you play, Cody? Did you have a nice song? In terms of overall sound I'm creating, is there an order to adjustment that I tend to use, i.e. amp first, reverb? Okay, yes, there is, and that's a great sound. That's a great part to start out with. All right, now I'm in a different boat than most folks on account of the fact that I'm not playing a traditional amp. All right, so my amp exists outside of the confines of most traditional amplifiers, in that it doesn't get gainier by turning it up. All right, I don't have a power amp that adds harmonic content. Meaning, okay, are you hip to any of the new iterations of the Scene, JRAD, Dead & Co? Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we can talk about all those, and I definitely have my thoughts on all that stuff. Follow up here to Hayes' question, am I using the effects loop? I'm not using the effects loop. I simply use the there's 4 effects blocks, and then there's 4 post effects blocks. I've tried using the effects loop, but it doesn't make sense if it takes up a block. I might as well just use the onboard block. I don't even use the extension pedals. I literally have a cable. This is, people ask me to show them my rig, and I go, here it is. Because I literally take this and plug it in, and that's that. But back to the order of operations, PEMDAS, so to speak, for my guitar rig. If I was working with a traditional amp, the very first thing you want to do is make sure you've got enough amp to get over your drummer, but not so much amp that you can't get it breathing. It needs to actually be engaged. All right, so let's say that there's like a takeoff point where the note has to get to for the amp to actually do anything other than be kind of cold and sterile. All right, so I will definitely get to all that stuff, and we'll talk about all the songs. Those are great songs, by the way. That's nice, including Terrapin. Jesus. All right, so I assume you stopped at the 9-minute mark at when Lady and Fan is done. So the idea of figuring out whether or not because if you have like a Princeton reverb, you're not going to have enough headroom unless you're mic'd and everywhere. Okay, so let's assume that you're dealing with something that's roughly 30 watts. That's usually enough. 32 watts into a JBL will get over any drummer, as far as I can see. All right, and still be clean-ish. Like, okay, not quite a dirty clean, but definitely like pushing it. It's not just pure pristine. That said, the JBL isn't really being maxed. Even a single JBL being pushed by 30 watts, you'd have to choose one of the lower output models, or you could, you can do what the Earth Drive is kind of designed to do, which is kind of give some of that pushed speaker sound, but still allow enough clean sound to get through. And so not to steal from Sarno, that's one of the elements of the Kemper that I appreciate so much, is that I can insert something that has a blend feature. And so you guys have probably heard me talk about how I'm using a tube screamer that's built into the Kemper. So right now, I'm on the my trucking setup, okay? So that's the, right there. All right, so definitely more of a, kind of sound where it's a little overdriven. The amp is definitely engaged. If I remove the tube screamer that's doing that, though, the sound will get significantly cleaner and plinkier. So I'm doing versus. Now you can see how that smooths out the lower trebles and presence. It rounds off the top end of my note, making it much sweeter, which is the effect of overdriving or pushing a speaker with hundreds of watts of clean power. It definitely balances it creates much more of an equilibrium between the metal dust cap, which is where all that zingy shit lives, and the body of the guitar sound, which we've already talked about is relatively lean and neutral. It's pretty balanced. It's not like he's on, sorry, I should have been on the middle pickup there. So we're looking for like no excess out of the sound to kind of occupy the same lane as the trademark Garcia stuff. Right now, obviously there's outlier tones that were brighter or bassier or whatever over the years. But generally speaking, you want to be above your lowest note shouldn't really extend into the bass's range in terms of the frequencies. You can have a lot of bass lines that are played like, but we want it to be kind of tight and a little splatty up top, but not a lot of fullness in the bottom. And that tube screamer circuit really helps kind of emulate the sound of a speaker that has the paper cone finally in balance with the metal dust cap, because most of you guys that are out there rocking like a SMS rig, like a Sarno preamp with a Carvin power amp or some sort of power amp, or even a Quiltner or whatever, some sort of a Milkman, and you go and you get a nice JBL to go with it, and you sit there and you put it at the level that you can muster in your house, or that your drummer can keep up with, you are still not really engaging the paper part of the dust of the speaker very much. You're still hearing like there's if you're creating a vinaigrette, those two ingredients are not in parallel. They're not balanced really until you're much louder than you probably want to be. And there's no way of getting around this other than finding low output JBLs, which even still, they're still very loud. These are like 103 dB, speakers, very, very loud. So bathtub leak ruined my ceiling. Yeah, it's not a bathtub. We had radiant heat in the floor. Yeah, so So if you're tuning in late to the trauma that we suffered here, I live in a very nice, tricked out kind of modern brownstone here in the city. And unfortunately, the radiant heat that we installed throughout the house has begun to fail. So either somebody punctured it and it's finally leaking 10 years later, or there's been a material flaw. We'll find out when they pull up the entire floor that's above that and replace the PEX underneath, and then redo our entire first floor of our house, which is going to reform. We're going to be living someplace else for a couple of months, which is going to suck. It's a major, major hassle with insurance. So anyway, so yes, so good for you for noticing that. Yes, sorry. Anyway, I left the TV on, I guess, it's on the screensaver setting, so now you're getting this backlit kind of thing behind me. Anyway, the sound of that tube screamer really does wonders for taming the plinkiness of a dead clean sound, this is what you'd be hearing. So back here, if I ditch that, mid-range comes up, treble spike kind of disappears, bass gets kind of brought up a little bit more, and there's a little bit more depth and growl in the mid-range that kind of creates a little bark, which when really it's like it focuses the sound into the area where I really want to inhabit and kind of own the most. I don't need to be full spectrum. I have cymbals to contend with up here, and in order to hear that detail way up high, it resorts in an overly shrill sound. In order to represent the bass any lower, I end up stepping on the bass player's dick, and that's no fun. All right, he's got a big one, so we don't want to upset Kieran. All right, so the idea of owning your frequency range is a huge part of actually being a responsible bandmate. Also, being aware of your volume and when you need to be there. Hey guys, that's my contractor. I got a jet. All right. Love you very much. I'll see you around the campfire. Gotta go. Sorry, he's actually on time. I can't believe it.